Welcome to the QBConnect podcast. I'm Darren Slack, and I've got my son, lead instructor for NFA, Michael Slack. How are you?
Doing great.
Great to have you here today. We're going to talk about camps. Should we go to them? Are they worth it? Should we just bail on camps because I got a regional coach? Should I do camps at all? Michael, should a parent or a coach send a kid to a quarterback camp?
No, absolutely not. There's no reason to do it.
It doesn't make a lot of sense with some of the things that are offered out there. I would agree. There's no question.
No, people definitely make you feel that way, especially as it relates to regional coaching and like, oh, I got a personal trainer, I got this guy. It can start to feel like there's no purpose for camps anymore, which I know you and I disagree with, and you've been doing this for 37 years. How do you keep doing that for that long and do something that's meaningful that continues to evolve?
That's a great question. And I'm going to say something that probably could be offensive here, but the reality is we have learned a few things about how to do a camp that others don't. So when we show up on site, we know how to do things to get into a kid's heart, to get into his mind that others don't over 37 years. We just do it differently. It doesn't mean it's always better in every way, but I can guarantee you a lot of them will leave saying, I had no idea you could get that much across to my kid in one weekend.
Well, I think our focus point is different, right? Like the way that our approach is, we're focusing on helping the player develop as a person, not just to get better at football. You see a lot of camps, and the emphasis is just, showcase how good kids are as football players, or help them to even the main focus being improving players in football, but they lose the main thing, which is these kids are people that need to develop as men to be able to grow in more than just being able to throw a football better.
I get it. I think a lot of people would probably, hang on a minute, we do leadership too. We have character talks at our camps too. Well, I'm not going to be critical. I'm saying a lot of them would say the same thing. What makes you different? Well, I think we're not doing character and leadership. We're doing heart stuff. And that's a little deeper than just saying, hey, be the man you say you're going to be. Show up on time, show early, all those typical weight room cliches you hang up on the wall. That will do its own thing. But the kids have been there, done that, have the t-shirt, literally. What I do and what we've really developed is a process where we connect right off the bat. We connect with things that bother them, things that are real in their hearts. We get authentic. And I realize it sounds kind of like, well, what are you doing? You spreading something in the air? Are you putting something in their drink? Nope. We're just talking to them in a way that helps them understand we understand what they're going through. We know what they're experiencing, and we know how to give them strategies to overcome it. And then we do that right up front. We don't hold it till the end. We don't say it when something goes wrong. We start with it. And I think that opens their heart to something that's very difficult, and that's change.
It's a risk to bring that up, because what you risk is players, checking out early.
Absolutely.
or starting to, harden towards that because they're not used to, they're shocked. They're like, hey,
Yeah.
I thought we were going to go out and start throwing in like 15 minutes. And then once they hear stuff that's a little bit deeper than what they were expecting, they're kind of confronted with, okay, so now what am I going to do? Am I going to, lean into this, or am I going to kind of, check out until we start throwing again?
We make it difficult for them because up front we use some tactics, some questions that make them really think long and hard about why they're there. And I think it's probably true for every young man that he has to evaluate his why, because I don't think a lot of kids really have a real clear picture of why they're playing. It doesn't mean that they don't like the game. They love the game. It has to go deeper than that, though, and we've learned that. And so we ask some really hard questions about why the kid's there. We ask some really pointed questions about what they're trying to accomplish. And then we begin to expose weaknesses that are common to young men. And when that happens, now they're faced with a conundrum. Am I going to buy into this guy who's talking about something that's a little personal, that's getting a little close? I'm not offending them. I'm just exposing the common problems that every young athlete faces for 37 years of experience, and it suddenly forces them into a decision. We have so many kids that'll come with us. They're like, I get it. Now what do I do about it, coach? And now all of a sudden, they're open when we start the mechanics talk.
Yeah, I think that the point that you made about they have to make a decision is the most important part, I think, about our opening talk, is that we don't do mediocre. And when you let a kid just go through a camp like they've always done it, they're going to get mediocre results. There has to be something different that is confronting them right away, where they're like, okay, I'm either going to stay the same way or I'm going to change. And if they don't have that decision point, then they're not going to take that and move forward with it once they leave the camp.
Right. And that becomes a very personal, very individual decision that every athlete has to make, which is why no matter what level of talent they are when they arrive, they're all in the same place. They all have that moment of decision, and we're not going to put them on the spot or embarrass them. It's just the material does that for them. Now, many parents will leave that first meeting and they'll go, we got our whole camp's value from this opening talk.
Yeah, they're leaving fist
We're
bumping.
ready to leave. We get in the car. They're fist bumping, high-fiving, because they realize for the first time somebody's saying not only what they've been trying to say, but they've said it in a way that got through. And I think that is where the whole thing starts, is how do you connect with my son? How do you connect with my player in a way that makes him trust you right out of the gate? So that's one thing that separates us. I think the next thing, and you do a really good job of this, is you lay out the why behind what we're teaching. Talk about that for a second. Why is that important?
Yeah, so when we're actually talking about the mechanical side of things or movement or what we're actually teaching from a playing standpoint, there has to be something beyond, well, because I said so or because I played. There has to be something behind it that is actually meaningful, that when a player attempts it, there's a tangible feel that they can have to be able to reproduce it. If they can't feel it, they can't reproduce it. If they don't know the difference between what they were doing and what they need to do, then there's nothing that they're going to be able to do moving forward beyond that.
That's one of the biggest challenges coaches face, I think, is that, well, if I put him on video, it'll work. Well, the reality is no matter when a kid throws a ball, he never sees himself throw. He can only feel it. We can only see it. So there's this challenge that goes on between what the coach sees and what the player feels, and we got to bridge that gap, don't we?
Yeah, and that's really the challenge, and really what separates good coaches from great coaches is guys that are able to bridge that gap for a player and to be able to express something in a way that's actually meaningful for a kid. When it's like, oh, the light bulb goes off when they're making a change, stems from, oh, I can actually feel that, what you were saying, what you saw and what you were trying to describe to me, I can actually feel it now and I can actually implement it.
Now, what if my kid's 8, though? I mean, what are they going to understand if they're 8? I mean, and this is a common issue with camps is, well, I don't want to be around little kids when I go to a camp. One of the things you're going to experience differently in our camps is that because of the way the opening talk goes, you're immediately confronted with, it doesn't matter who's present. I'm the only one in this camp that matters right now. I don't care if you're 16. I don't care if you're 8. Every young person is suddenly confronted with the fact that nobody else at the camp matters except what I'm doing with me right now. And I think that is a powerful tool to break them of this idea of who they're around, who's present. And then we begin to install, if you will, this why behind it. And now they're starting to have tools, aren't they?
Yeah, a lot of players have this thought process that the context actually matters. Like if they're working with older guys, it's going to help them to by osmosis get better. The reality is that when you're facing having to improve, that's you and you, man. There's nobody else that has to try and approach that and address that. And so when we posture that right up front, it forces kids to be able to, like you said, make that decision whether or not they're going to engage in it or they're going to kind of back off.
Well, let's accept one of the things is really true. No matter whether you're in a regional setting as a player or a camp setting, change is hard. And mom and dad or coach, if you're listening, understand that what we're asking them to do when they come to an event is difficult. Any amount of moving the needle to adjust a thought process is very difficult. And we're not asking them to do something that's easy or just, hey, just do this a little different, do this a little different. Of course, you can pick up a little razzle-dazzle thing here and there, a Mahomes-like throw. But when you're really trying to change something, even if it's a slight adjustment in the grip or a slight adjustment in the drop, that is cataclysmic to the emotions of the player.
Yeah, there's two main things that like barriers that I would see to those things. One would be if a kid doesn't have the inspiration to actually go and work on it consistently. Like if they don't have the drive to want to do something consistently, and two, if they don't know what to do, right? So we got talented players that don't have like, okay, I'm good enough. I don't have the drive to try and continue to get better, or you have kids that have the desire to get better, but they don't know what to do. And I think our camp is the perfect marriage of those two things, is that we're addressing both sides of it, is that you have to have the consistency and the character to kind of push this process, to be consistent with it. But also we give you the tools to be able to do it yourself, meaning that you don't have to rely on a coach to be able to get better. And that's a weird thing to say. It's like, hey, this is our job, is to help kids get better. But if you have to rely on a coach and you're not learning it yourself, then when you get into a game, what are you going to do? Like, coach isn't going to be there on the 50-yard line with you. You have to learn it yourself.
We talk about self-correct, don't self-destruct. And I still think that's true and has been for 37 years, that if you can teach a kid how to self-correct, in other words, get him to own what he already owns. You say it at every camp. These are your mechanics. We're not choosing, to do anything for you. These aren't our mechanics you're going to throw our way. It's not our way. It's you throw your way, and then what we're going to do is negotiate with you with what we believe are kinesiologically sound and strong points as possible solutions to the issues you're facing within your own throwing motion.
Yeah, like one of the biggest things that we talk about with being able to play well is having confidence. And if a player doesn't have confidence in their own mechanics because they're trying to emulate what someone else said they should do without, showing them or giving them the ability to actually change that, then they're not going to be confident when they go and play. And that's a problem when you're talking about trying to perform in a very difficult position. Arguably, in my opinion, the hardest position in sports to be able to play at a high level.
So one of the things we've done for many years that we learned was this whole idea of a systematic standard. We really try to emphasize something that is majority of the kids could learn, whether that be an arm position or a body angle, or, as you've heard some coaches say, put the ball on the shelf, or they have a particular thing they like to do at their camp that is kind of important for every kid to do the same way. And we learned that that was really not the best way to go about it. Every athlete has to have non-negotiables in their throwing mechanics. In other words, certain standards that they have to meet. The arm has to be in a certain position. Their body has to be rotational. Their power source has to be from the ground. Their base has to be stable. There's things that are non-negotiable, but getting there is unique to every player by virtue of their learning style, as well as the tools that we can use for every individual kid. I don't think many camps or programs are set up to cover that kind of scope in such a short amount of time.
No, because it does take a lot of time and individual work throughing as a coach to be able to give multiple solutions to players that are actually going to be meaningful. But you also have to understand that your way isn't the only way,
right,
and that your bent or your preference for a throw doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to help this particular kid. And some kids are so far along in terms of their throwing mechanics that making a significant change in one direction might actually make them worse. And so learning how to be able to shift it in such a way or alter it in such a way that they still benefit, but they're not losing the confidence in their ability to actually just throw the football.
So what you're saying then is that there's actually an important difference between the preference of a coach to make a change and the actual need.
We all have preferences. Every coach that has ever coached ever has a way that they like to see the ball thrown, and that's difficult to get over. The biggest challenge for me is when I'm working with a player is to not let my preference influence what is going to help this kid the most.
Well, getting a kid to do something different is hard on its own, but overcoming your own preferences to how it should look is also awkward. I mean, what would you do with a Patrick Mahomes if he's throwing sidearm, a little bit more gunslinger type? They had to come up with nicknames for this stuff because they were so much an outlier as to the systematic standard that was being created for throwing. And I think one of the things that we've come to appreciate about this whole process is the win is not being able to get them to look like you want them to look. It's being able to get them to perform on Saturday or on Friday.
Yeah, let's not lose the main focus here is that they actually have to go out on a Friday night or a Saturday morning and actually play the game of football and actually do it to the best that they can. And so if a kid completes a pass, their solution mechanically was good enough to complete the pass. And so not losing sight of that in the, hey, it didn't look as good as I thought it should have, or, hey, it wasn't my teaching in that particular throw.
So in wrapping up this concept, I think the first thing you got to have is know why you're going to a camp. Know what you're trying to achieve. If you want exposure, if you want an experience, if you want development, know why you're going. Second thing is make sure when you get to that camp that they have a compelling argument. You need to make sure that when you listen to the coaches talk, they talk with why behind what they're saying, not just spouting information. They're not just talking out loud. And I think another thing you got to have is you got to see how willing they are to commit to your athlete's heart. And like I said, the leadership stuff, the character stuff can all be there, but are they connecting in a way that's getting their kid to buy in? Is the athlete buying into their own personal development, or are they just hung up on the drills and the hype and the sound and the music that's happening? Because none of that will produce change. They have to have a personal experience where they make a choice. And if that coach doesn't drive that choice within them, you're not going to get the payday at that camp.
Right. Yeah. It's extremely important that that buy-in happens on a personal level for the kid, not just the parent, or not just that they thought it was cool, or, there's a guy that had played before and, obviously that's going to be what's going to get me there. There's got to be a buy-in to, I know what I got to do to get better, and I'm willing to go and do what it takes to actually do that.
So what we would offer for your consideration is NFA has solutions that are unique to what most regional camps would have, simply because either they haven't been exposed to what we do, or our experience just is a little bit more than what they have. Doesn't make us better or more permanently the solution. We just want to help. We want to be part of the village that you're putting together to help your athlete get where they want to go. So we would submit that NFA could be a solution for you. We'd invite you to visit www.quarterbackacademy.com to find that solution for yourself. Michael, thanks for your help today. Really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
Want to encourage you to check us out at that website, but also do your homework on all the experiences you have, because we're not trying to replace anybody. We're just trying to come alongside you, as we have for 37 years, and make a difference. We'll see you next time on the QB Connect podcast.